I can see my hands shaking as I watch the security camera footage on my laptop, and there she is, Linda, my brother's nurse, doing something that makes absolutely no sense. She's sitting beside Brandon's bed at 2 in the morning, holding his hand, whispering something I can't quite make out. My first instinct is pure rage. I've hired her to take care of my paralyzed brother while he recovers from the accident, and instead, I'm watching what looks like some kind of manipulation. But then I see something else. I see tears streaming down her face. I see her kissing his forehead like she's praying, and I realize I have no idea what's actually happening in that room. That's when I decide to do something stupid. 3 weeks ago, everything felt normal. Not perfect, but solid. The kind of life you stop thinking about because it just works. Brandon and I lived in the same suburb, Riverside Heights, about 20 minutes outside Denver, in a neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbor's business and their credit scores. My house was a 2004 Colonial on Maple Street with a mortgage I could actually manage, a 401k that was slowly growing, and a golden retriever named Murphy, who still thought he was a puppy. Brandon lived 2 blocks over in a townhouse he'd bought 5 years back as a bachelor pad. He was 31, handsome in that effortless way that annoyed me, worked in commercial real estate, and had been dating a woman named Stephanie for about 2 years. They seemed fine, not passionate, but stable. He'd text me pictures from weekend hikes, we'd grab coffee every other Tuesday, and life just moved forward the way it's supposed to. Then came the morning of October 14th. I was at work. I'm a project manager at a mid-size marketing firm downtown, when my phone exploded with notifications. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw Mom's name, then Dad's, then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be a hospital in Aurora. Brandon had been hit by a delivery truck while crossing the street on his morning run. He was alive. That was the first thing the ER doctor told me, like she knew I needed to hear those 3 words before anything else. But he was paralyzed from the waist down. Spinal cord injury. They couldn't guarantee recovery. They wouldn't even use the word recovery. They said improvement instead, which somehow felt worse. I left work in the middle of a client call, just closed my laptop and drove to the hospital. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind wasn't anywhere near my body. I kept thinking about the coffee we'd had 5 days before. Brandon had complained about his shoes, about a deal that fell through, about Stephanie wanting to move in together. Normal stuff, the kind of stuff you nod along to without realizing it might be the last time you'll hear someone complain about their shoes. He was awake when I got there. That was the second shock. I'd imagined him in a coma or sedated, but there he was, Brandon, my little brother, with his eyes open and aware, trapped in his own body like a bird watching the world from inside glass. "Hey," he said. His voice was thin. "Guess the truck won." I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I just held his hand and tried not to cry in front of him, which was stupid because he cried first, and then I did. And for a while, we just sat there like that. The hospital stay was 7 weeks. 7 weeks of watching my brother learn that his legs didn't work anymore. 7 weeks of Mom flying in from Albuquerque and sleeping in the hospital chair, of Dad rearranging his entire schedule to be there every afternoon, of Stephanie visiting twice before breaking up with him via a conversation that lasted 4 minutes. I know because I timed it, standing outside the hospital room door like some kind of creep, listening to her explain, very politely, that she couldn't do this, that she wasn't strong enough, that she was sorry. Brandon didn't cry that time. He just stared at the ceiling and said, "I get it," in a voice so hollow it scared me more than anything else had. Physical therapy was brutal. He was determined, I'll give him that. But determination doesn't change physics. His legs didn't move. The doctors said maybe, with time, there could be some nerve regeneration. Maybe he'd regain partial sensation. Maybe. In the meantime, he was learning to transfer from bed to wheelchair, to manage his bowel and bladder function, to exist in a body that had betrayed him. By December, he was cleared to go home. The hospital recommended in-home nursing care, and I immediately started researching options. I wasn't going to let him sit alone in that townhouse, watching his life happen through a window. I could afford to help, and Brandon needed help, so that's what I did. I called an agency called Riverside Home Care and started interviewing nurses. That's where Linda came into the picture. She was 43, a widow, with 15 years of nursing experience and credentials that were spotless. Her interview was professional and direct. She asked smart questions about Brandon's needs, didn't oversell herself, and had references that checked out perfectly. She started the first week of January. For the first month, everything was fine. More than fine, actually. Linda was efficient. She managed his medications, helped with physical therapy exercises, kept the townhouse clean, and seemed genuinely good at her job. Brandon texted me updates like, "Linda made me actually edible lunch," and "She didn't let me skip pay today," which sucks, but I respect it. I paid her $15 an hour, 40 hours a week, through the agency. It was expensive, but worth it. My brother wasn't alone. He was getting better, slowly but measurably. His upper body strength was improving. He was making dark jokes again. Life was settling into a new normal. Then, around week 6, I started noticing something. Small things. Brandon would mention conversations with Linda that seemed deeper than nurse-patient chat. He asked me if I thought it was unprofessional for her to share personal stuff. I told him no, that boundaries could be flexible, that it was good if he had someone to talk to besides our worried family. But then I got the credit card bill. It was a charge from a restaurant called the Olive Branch, dated for a Thursday evening when Linda was supposed to be at the house. The charge was for 2 people, $78. I almost didn't say anything, almost just let it go. But I was paying her to care for my brother, not to go out on dates, so I asked him about it. He got quiet in a way that made my stomach drop. And then he said something that changed everything. I asked her to take me to dinner. We went in her car. She figured out how to fit the wheelchair. I didn't know what to feel. Protective instinct screamed that this was inappropriate, that Linda was taking advantage of a vulnerable man. But Brandon's voice had changed. There was something in it I hadn't heard since before the accident. Something like hope. That's when the paranoia started. I told myself I was protecting him. I told myself I just needed to know what was happening. I installed the security camera in his bedroom on the pretense of monitoring his safety at night. A fire hazard alert, I said. A way to make sure he could call for help if he fell. Brandon seemed skeptical, but didn't push back. Then I started watching the footage every night. For the first 2 weeks, there was nothing. Just Linda helping him with his nighttime routine, checking his vitals, making sure he was comfortable, professional, appropriate. Then came the night I saw her at 2 in the morning, holding his hand, whispering things I couldn't hear, tears on her face. And that's when I decided I needed to know exactly what was going on. So I decided to do something stupid. I decided to pretend to be Brandon. It started as a half-baked idea on a Wednesday night. I was sitting in my home office with the security footage paused on that image of Linda holding his hand, and I thought, what if I just knew what was actually happening? What if I could hear the conversations, see the context, instead of watching a 2-second clip through a camera lens like some kind of paranoid stalker? Which is exactly what I was being. But I didn't want to admit that yet. I called the agency on Thursday morning and asked if Linda could work an extra shift. Overnight, Friday to Saturday. The manager said it was last minute, but Linda had agreed to it. No problem. I said I was worried about Brandon's sleep patterns and wanted to monitor him. Professional concern. They bought it. Friday afternoon, I drove to Brandon's townhouse with a story prepared. I'd tell him I was staying over, that I wanted to check on him, that I'd been worried. All true statements arranged into a deceptive package. But when I got there, Linda was leaving for the day shift. She worked mornings and early evenings, and she gave me a look that made my stomach flip. Not suspicious, just knowing. Like she could see exactly what I was doing, and had already decided to let me do it anyway. "He's in a good mood today," she said, gathering her coat. "We did some extra PT. He's tired but happy." Happy. She used that word like it meant something. "Thanks," I said, and I meant it, which made everything worse. Brandon was in the living room when I came in, transferred to his wheelchair, watching a soccer game with the kind of focused attention he used to reserve for work. He looked better than he had in months, stronger in the shoulders, clearer in the eyes. The hollowed-out version of my brother, that had existed since October, seemed to be filling back in. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, not even turning around. "You never come by on Fridays." "Wanted to check on you," I said. "Thought I'd stay the night. Make sure you're doing okay." He finally looked at me, and something flickered across his face. Not quite suspicion, but awareness that something was off. "I'm fine, Ashley. Linda's been great. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged and went back to the game. "Cool. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Linda made it." Of course she did. I helped him with dinner, with his evening routine, with the transfer to bed. Everything felt normal and completely wrong at the same time. I was touching my brother's legs to help position him, and all I could think about was Linda doing the same thing with tenderness in her hands instead of duty. By 11 p.m., he was asleep. I'd set up in the guest room, but I didn't go to bed. Instead, I sat in the dark hallway with my phone, staring at the baby monitor I'd brought, the one I'd told Brandon was for safety, angled toward his bedroom. At 1:47 a.m., Linda arrived for the overnight shift. I heard the soft knock, the key code being entered, the whisper of the door opening. She moved through the townhouse like she lived there, like she knew exactly where everything was. I stayed frozen in the hallway, watching through the monitor as she went into Brandon's room. He was awake. That was the first shock. He was already awake, waiting for her, his face transforming the moment she appeared in the doorway. "You came back," he said. "I said I would." She sat on the edge of his bed, and even through the pixelated screen, I could see the way they looked at each other. Not like nurse and patient, like two people who had decided, against all logic and professional boundaries, that they mattered to each other. "How long can you stay?" he asked. "An hour, maybe a little more. Your sister is sleeping, but I need to be careful." My sister. She knew I was here. She'd known the whole time. "Tell me something," Brandon said. "Tell me something I don't know about you." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, the same gesture I'd seen on the security footage, and I realized I'd misread everything. This wasn't manipulation. This was intimacy. This was two people choosing each other. "My husband," she said softly. "He had a stroke when he was 48. I was a nurse then, just like I am now. I took care of him at home for 3 years. Every single day, I helped him with the things his body wouldn't do anymore. And every single day, he looked at me like I was the last good thing in his life." She paused, and even through the monitor, I could see her composing herself. "He died on a Tuesday. And I realized that I'd spent 3 years being so focused on what he couldn't do that I almost missed what we still had. The conversations, the way he'd squeeze my hand when I was sad, the fact that he still made me laugh." Brandon's face had gone very still. "When I met you," Linda continued, "I saw that same thing, a person who was alive, who was still in there. And I thought maybe I could help you see that too." "Linda," Brandon whispered, "I know this is inappropriate. I know I should have maintained professional distance. But I also know that life is very short, and sometimes the most important thing isn't following the rules. Sometimes it's just being present, with someone, really present." I watched my brother cry silently, his shoulders shaking, Linda's hand steady on his chest. That's when I did something I've never admitted to anyone. I put down the baby monitor. I walked back to the guest room, and I sat on the bed, shaking, realizing that I had become the person I'd always despised, the one who watches other people's lives through a lens, making judgments about things I didn't understand. I had hired Linda to take care of Brandon's body, but she'd done something I couldn't do. She'd helped him reclaim his life, and I was about to destroy it because I was afraid. The question was, would I? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in the guest room, listening to the soft sounds of Linda moving through the townhouse, helping Brandon with whatever he needed, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness yet, not understanding, just the beginning of shame. By 4 a.m., I'd made a decision. I was going to fire her, not because she'd violated professional boundaries, though she had. Not because she was taking advantage of Brandon, though I'd convinced myself of that. I was going to fire her because I was terrified. Terrified that my paralyzed brother had found something with someone that looked more real than anything I'd seen in my own marriage. Terrified that I'd hired someone to save his life, and she'd actually done it. Terrified that I couldn't control the outcome. Linda left at 6 a.m., before Brandon woke up. I watched her gather her things, saw her check her phone, saw her take a breath like she was steeling herself for something. She knew. She absolutely knew what I'd done, and she was ready for the consequences. I drove home and called the agency by 9. I need to terminate Linda's contract, I told the manager, a woman named Karen, with a voice that suggested she'd had this conversation before. Is there a problem with her performance? No, she's excellent. It's just, I don't think she's the right fit anymore. There was a pause. Ashley, I have to be honest with you. Linda told me she expected this call. She said you might discover something and make a decision based on incomplete information. She asked me to tell you that whatever you decide, she understands. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She didn't violate any policies with your brother. She checked. We have specific guidelines about relationships between healthcare providers and clients, and they're intentionally flexible because we understand that human connection is part of healing. As long as there's no abuse, no financial exploitation, and both parties consent, which they do, it's not our place to interfere. I couldn't speak. She's a good nurse, Ashley, one of the best we have, and your brother is lucky to have her. But that's not my decision to make. It's yours. I hung up without saying goodbye. For the next hour, I sat in my home office with the door closed and my phone in my hand, cycling through rage and guilt and a kind of nauseating clarity. I'd installed a secret camera in my brother's bedroom. I'd impersonated him, sort of, by lying about why I was staying over. I'd built an entire narrative about Linda being predatory based on a 2-second clip of her holding his hand at 2 in the morning. And I still hadn't actually talked to either of them. So I did something that should have been obvious from the start. I called Brandon. Hey, he answered on the second ring. What's up? I need to talk to you about Linda. The line went silent for long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Okay, he said carefully. What about her? I saw the footage from the security camera, from last night. I know you two are involved. Another silence. Then, you put a camera in my bedroom. It wasn't a question. He sounded less surprised than disappointed. I was worried about you. No, Ashley, you were worried about controlling me. There's a difference. I'd never heard him use that tone with me before. It was calm in a way that hurt more than anger would have. Is she manipulating you? Is she? Stop, he said. Just stop. Linda is the first person since the accident who's treated me like I'm still a person, not a tragedy, not a charity case, not something broken that needs to be fixed. Just Brandon, a person she happens to care about. And yes, I care about her too. Is that so hard to understand? She's your nurse, Brandon. There's a power imbalance. Do you know what Linda did before she became a nurse? Do you know anything about her life? I didn't. Her husband had a stroke. She spent 3 years taking care of him. 3 years watching someone she loved lose pieces of themselves. And then he died. And instead of giving up, instead of deciding that vulnerability wasn't worth it, she became a nurse so she could help other people, so she could be present for people in the worst moment of their lives. That's not predatory, Ashley. That's the opposite of predatory. My eyes were burning. I'm sorry, I said. I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have put a camera in my room. You shouldn't have lied about why you were staying over. You shouldn't have treated me like I'm incapable of making my own decisions just because I can't walk. That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've decided that the only thing that changed about me is my legs. Everything else, my judgment, my capacity to consent, my right to choose who I want in my life, apparently that all stopped working too. I couldn't argue because he was right. What do you want me to do? I asked. I want you to trust me. I want you to call Linda and apologize. And I want you to understand that I'm still in here. I'm still making decisions. Some of them might be messy or complicated or not what you would choose for me, but they're mine. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my home office and felt something break open inside me. Not my heart, something deeper than that. Some fundamental belief I'd been carrying about who I was, what I owed to people I loved, and where the line was between protection and control. It took me 3 hours to dial Linda's number. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "Hi, Ashley," she said. Her voice was gentle. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry for the camera. I'm sorry for the lie. I'm sorry for planning to fire you before I even talked to you. I'm sorry for making assumptions about what you and Brandon are doing based on 30 seconds of footage and my own fear." "Okay," she said. "Is that it? Just okay? What else would you like me to say?" "I don't know. That you forgive me? That you understand why I was protective?" "I do understand," Linda said. "Linda, you love your brother. You were scared of losing him again. But Ashley, he's not lost. He's actually more present now than he was when he was healthy. I see it every day. I know that now. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" I thought about the security camera, about the assumptions I'd made, about the way I'd treated my brother like he couldn't be trusted with his own life. "I'm going to take down the camera," I said. "I'm going to apologize to Brandon properly, and I'm going to trust that he knows what he's doing." "That's a good start," Linda said. "He's a good man. Even now. Especially now." "I know. And Ashley? For what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. Not unless he asks me to. I love him too much for that." The words hung in the air between us, and I realized they weren't a threat. They were a promise. I drove to Brandon's townhouse that evening and took down the camera. He was in the living room, and I didn't say anything, just walked past him to the bedroom and unplugged it. When I came back out, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's gone," I said. "All of it. The camera, the surveillance, the guilt-driven decisions. From now on, your life is yours. Even if I mess it up? Especially then." He nodded, and something shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. I'd seen him as broken and in need of saving. Now, I was beginning to understand that he'd been saving himself all along. Linda had just been kind enough to stand beside him while he did it. 3 months later, Linda gave notice to the agency. She'd been offered a position at a private clinic. Better hours, better pay. But that wasn't why she was leaving. She was leaving because Brandon had asked her to move in. Not as his nurse, as his partner. They told me together, sitting in Brandon's living room on a Sunday afternoon. He held her hand while he said it, and there was a lightness in him that I hadn't seen since before the accident. More than lightness, joy. "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it completely. "I'm really happy for you." "Thank you," Linda said. "That matters." The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends, held in the backyard of their new house, a place they'd found together with wide doorways and an accessible bathroom and a ramp that Brandon had designed himself. He'd started consulting on accessibility issues for real estate developers. He had a purpose again, and it had nothing to do with his legs and everything to do with his mind, his creativity, his will. I brought Murphy, my golden retriever, and watched my brother get married in the spring sunshine, and I thought about how close I'd come to destroying something beautiful because I couldn't accept that his life didn't have to look like mine to be worth living. Linda caught my eye during the ceremony and smiled at me. Not a smile that said I told you so, but one that said thank you for finally seeing him, for letting him be. And that's the thing about making mistakes with people you love. You can't unmake them. You can only move forward and be better. You can only trust that the people who matter will eventually understand that you were doing the best you could with a broken heart and incomplete information. I was doing my best. So was Linda. And Brandon. He was doing better than any of us.